Hey guys, it's Pastor John. So glad you are able to join me today for lunch with St. Luke. In our last episode, Jesus read from the prophet Isaiah, from Isaiah 61, and really read his mission, really what his vision, his purpose, what he was all about. He found that mission there in the book of Isaiah and read that to them and said that it was being fulfilled in their hearing. So today, in episode 45, we are going to be looking a little bit at their reaction to him. So we're going to be looking at both verses 22 and 23. They were all speaking well of him and were amazed by the gracious words that came from his mouth. Yet they said, "Isn't this Joseph's son?" So here we have a very positive reaction. Speaking well of him. The term there for amazed is from thaumazo, athamason. It's to be amazed, to wonder, to marvel, to honor, admire, even to show respect or express astonishment. They were all amazed at what Jesus was saying, at his teaching. So in general, that's a positive reaction that's going on there. They were all speaking well of him and were amazed by the gracious words that came from his mouth. Yet they said, "Isn't this Joseph's son?" So here you have a little bit of that, familiarity, right? A little bit about, well, we know this guy. He's just, one of the guys from our town. He was one of the kids in our high school. Isn't this Joseph's son? It's that kind of familiarity that can allow for affection, but of course it also can breed contempt. And so Jesus responds back to this. Then he said to them, "No doubt you will quote this proverb to me, 'Doctor, heal yourself.' So all we've heard that took place in Capernaum, do here in your hometown also." So all the stuff that Jesus is doing in the ministry, not just the teaching, but obviously here they're also talking about the miracles, which we're going to see. Luke's going to record for us here shortly. We'd like to see all that happen here in Nazareth, Jesus. Doctor, heal yourself. In fact, we've been all thinking a lot about medical procedures recently, right? We've all been having, the whole COVID situation and the COVID-19 vaccinations and all of that on our mind. I know here in Chicago, it's, a mad rush to try to get an appointment to get the vaccine. There's people finding who, were even accused of finding ways to jump in line before the different phase, 1C or whatever opened up. So it's a complicated medical time here in the city right now. But that idea of, doctor, heal yourself. Note that they're asking for him to do the same thing there in Nazareth that he did in Capernaum. Jesus ends up really moving the center of his ministry from Nazareth, which is sort of, to the west and south there in Galilee, somewhat close to Samaria, but from Nazareth on up to Capernaum, which is on the kind of northwest shore of the Sea of Galilee. So, that's really the shift, that kind of headquarters for Jesus and for his ministry that goes on. It's about, somewhere like around 25 miles from the one place to the other. But notice that what they are wanting for him to do is the same stuff in the hometown that he's doing there. And you have to ask, why is he not doing the same stuff in the hometown that he's doing there? We even know from some of the other Gospels that some of the reason why there aren't many miracles going on there in Galilee is because they're in Nazareth of Galilee. It's because they're having a hard time with faith. They're having a hard time believing him. They've got this familiarity. In some ways, they've actually had a kind of inoculation to Jesus, right? They've been around him enough. They are, of course, asking the question, isn't this Joseph's son, right? So while everything's that's going on is startling to them, they have in some ways just, from kind of non-intentionally being around Jesus, have come to that point where they're so familiar that, what should be seen as special, as sacred, is instead just seen as common and commonplace. And I think that's something which, of course, is a good question for all of us to consider. We all want that close, intimate walk with Jesus, for sure. But we also don't want to get to the point in our spiritual journey where we just take him for granted. We don't want to get to that place where it's just commonplace. We don't want to get just enough of Jesus in little tiny doses over time that we are just used to him, that we just have a kind of flannel graph picture of Jesus, rather than a real vibrant, shocking, startling view of Jesus that, really drives our hearts to trust him and to believe. There's a fine line there. We want to and should spend time with him every day. But we don't want that time which we have with him to always just be rote, to always just, be commonplace, to always be, just if you're walking through your experience with Jesus and it's always just white knuckling it. There's a tendency, I think, for that to become just, he becomes just commonplace, just another fixture in your life. If all that Jesus is to you is the religious habits that you build around him, then that actually is pretty sad. And that leaves you in a place, it leaves you in a pretty rough spiritual place, much in the place where these people in Nazareth were. So the application for us today is to be asking, how do we avoid looking at Jesus with the contempt? The contempt familiarity breeds. Not exactly easy to say. How do we avoid having just that kind of familiarity relationship with Jesus, that just enough Jesus to kind of keep us inoculated from him really impacting our lives? How do we avoid that? It's something which I'd like for you to ask today as you spend some time here after our time together, as you finish out your daily office with some prayer. I want to encourage you to ask that question. How do you build a relationship with Jesus that's real, that's profound, that's sincere, and that treats Jesus both with the intimacy that he desires to have with his people, but also with the kind of respect and awe that drives us to trust him and to worship him, rather than just viewing, our time with him as rote or commonplace. How do we avoid looking at Jesus with the contempt that familiarity breeds? Well, thank you again so much for joining me today. Hope you guys have a wonderful weekend. The Lord Jesus bless you, and I'm praying for each of you, and keep following Jesus.